Episode 1 of the Captain and the Real Deal podcast. Today's episode focuses on each team's history and how we became fans of our respective teams, the Seattle Seahawks and the Minnesota Vikings.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Damen und Herren, it's time for that podcast featuring Captain Vuk and Billy Gold, aka The Real Deal. This is the only place that's talking Hawks and Kings, but to be specific, we're talking Seattle Seahawks and Minnesota Vikings. So strap up. We're taking you on a fantastic voyage, unlike anything you've ever been on. So sit back and get ready to set sail to the emerald-rich lands of the Seattle Seahawks and the treasure-filled valleys of the Minnesota Vikings. With your hosts, Captain Vuk and Billy Gold, aka The Real Deal. Let's get it.
Welcome to our first episode. Captain, great to have you by my side. Are you ready to go?
Billy Gold, it's a pleasure to be here, my brother, and I'm excited and looking forward to what we're going to get into.
Great. We have our Top Gun, Mike Cruz, as our sound engineer, and he's going to hopefully stay with us for a long time because we're going to need him. Today's episode is history and how we became fans of our respective teams. So I'm going to start off with a little history about the Minnesota Vikings for all you Scolders out there. They're founded in 1960 as an expansion team, and this is really going to help the younger Minnesota Viking fans give you, some perspective in history. The team was officially named the Minnesota Vikings on September 27th, 1960, and they began playing the 1961 season. Some facts here. The Vikings have the highest regular season and combined winning percentage among NFL franchises who have not won a Super Bowl. And boy, we will talk about those Super Bowl losses at some point. And painful as they were, we did get there four times. In addition, they have the most playoff runs and division titles of teams that have not won Super Bowls. They're one of three teams, along with the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Los Angeles Rams, to appear in a conference championship every decade since the 1970s. And here's one sad note. The Vikings hold the most playoff losses in league history at 30. And I hope it's not and counting. The Vikings' trademarked horned helmet and purple and gold uniforms were designed by Los Angeles Examiner cartoonist Carl Hubenthal, who did both editorial and sports cartoons. Hubenthal also designed the original Norseman logo, which is an awesome logo, and I definitely have tattooed on my arm. They came out with a fight song. Skol Vikings is the fight song. The original one. It was introduced around the time the team was founded in 1961. It's always played when they score a touchdown, field goal, safety, the end of each half, and of course, upon victory. The words and music are attributed to James Red McLeod, a composer from Edina, Minnesota. Now, there's also another song that was recorded by a Minneapolis native. You might know him as Prince, and the song was called Purple and Gold. It was written to be used as a fight song for the Minnesota Vikings. However, I got to tell you, this is an awful, awful song. And Cap, you're a Prince fan, so I know this is hard to hear.
That is tough to hear.
You got to check that one out because you won't make it 30 seconds in, and you will shut that off.
I will put that on my list for sure.
Skål. Let's talk a little about skål. Skål is the Danish, Norwegian, Swedish word for cheers or good health, a salute or a toast. as to an admired person or group. So skål, the skål chant. When the Vikings moved into the U.S. Bank Stadium in 2016, they started a new tradition at home games called the Skol Chant. At various points during the game, the Viking fans raised their hands and clapped to the beat of a drum before yelling Skol. This was borrowed from a Viking war chant that was made famous by supporters of the Iceland national football team during their Cinderella run at the Euro 2016 Cup. Okay, the initial roster for the Minnesota Vikings. Let's talk a little bit about that. The Vikings' initial roster was created through an expansion draft and the regular season draft. Notables from the first ever draft included running back Tommy Mason from Tulane, who was their first round draft choice, and of course the legendary quarterback Fran Tarkenton out of Georgia, which they got in round 3. During the expansion draft, they selected guard Grady Alderman from the Detroit Lions, and Grady played quite some time with the Minnesota Vikings. I believe, if I remember correctly, about 12 years. First year, under head coach Norm Van Brocklin, the team finished with a 3-11 record. The team's first ever regular season game was a 37-13 victory against their division rivals, the Chicago Bears. In that game, rookie quarterback Fran Tarkenton came off the bench and tossed 4 touchdown passes, and he ran for another. So, how did I become a Minnesota Vikings fan? Well, during the 1969 season, at the age of 7, that's when I became a fan. My dad was a huge New York Giants fan, but 1969 was not a good year for them. They finished at 6-8 and had not had a winning season in many years. So the first game of that season was the Giants and the Vikings. And actually the Giants beat the Vikings, but I love the color scheme. I love the horn on the purple helmets and the Norseman logo. And I got to say, seeing the breath come out of those helmets on the frozen field of Metropolitan Stadium later in the year is something that I'll always remember. That year, they defeated the Los Angeles Rams 23-20 in a conference playoff game. I saw this game at my grandparents' house in their basement and remember the cold and snowy conditions. They went on the following week to defeat the Cleveland Browns in the final ever NFL championship game before the merger with the AFL, 27-7. They scored early and often, and this game was not close. I got one interesting side note to this victory. The Vikings never clutched the hardware. Back then, for the NFL championship, there was a trophy called the Ed Thorpe Memorial. It was supposed to travel for the team that won and then awarded to the next team who won the following year. It was first awarded to the Giants in 1934. It should, after that game, the 27-7 victory, been awarded to the Vikings. For years, it was assumed that Minnesota had misplaced the trophy or lost it after the merger, and because of that, Thorpe's ghost cast a Super Bowl curse on the franchise. However, there was no visual evidence of the Vikings ever receiving the trophy. According to Packers historian Cliff Christie, who set out to solve the mystery for an article that he wrote in 2018, the trophy never made it out of Green Bay after the Packers won it for the record 8th time in 1967. The Packers Hall of Fame discovered in 2015 that it had the trophy, which is now on display in the Packers Hall of Fame. Not only didn't the Vikings receive the trophy, but they're one of 3 teams whose name is not even on the trophy. The 1960 Eagles aren't on the trophy, although there was a spot where they were supposed to have been listed. And also the 1968 Colts is the other missing team along with the Vikings. Cap, that's a little start for the history on Minnesota and somewhat how I became a fan. So let's turn it over to you.
Billy Gold. That was a heck of an introduction, and I learned a lot about the Vikings that I did not know before. The story about the trophy not showing up and being housed in Green Bay explains clearly why that rivalry is so bitter to this day. They should have got you guys that trophy back. So what I want to do briefly is just say what's up to the 12s, everybody in the Emerald Nation, just to give a quick shout out. A touch base on how I became a fan of the Seattle Seahawks, who I love to represent, and talk about our history as well. I'll probably start with the current snapshot, but the way I became a fan was way back when the team became in existence, which was in 1976 when we played our first season. But prior to that, as a kid, the local police cars would ride up and down the street and hand out baseball cards of the Seattle Seahawks to all the kids in the neighborhood. So we'd be on the lookout, and every time we saw a police car, we'd run out there and hope that they had some extra cards. And that's kind of how it started, reading about the players and watching the games on the TV and talking about it with our family and having a good time with it that way. So for those that don't know, the current realm holders for the Seattle Seahawks, it's owned by Jody Allen, who was married to Paul Allen. May he rest in peace. Our chairman is Jody Allen as well, and our president is Chuck Arnold. The head coach is Pete Carroll. We'll get into him a lot later. And our general manager is John Schneider, who we'll also talk about a lot later. Again, the team became in existence in 1976. Our nicknames are the Hawks, the Blue Wave at one point, and then we also had a nickname of our defense, primarily the secondary, called the Legion of Boom from 2011 to 2017. And, one of the things you'll find out with regard to Seattle is that we love giving nicknames to groups and teams and players. So our professional history, we've got one league championship. We've won the Super Bowl just once. We've been to the Super Bowl 3 times. The 2013 Super Bowl, which was Super Bowl 48, we were able to beat the Denver Broncos in a beautiful, beautiful victory, which I'll talk about that a lot later. We also had 2 heartbreaking losses. One to the Pittsburgh Steelers in Super Bowl 40, and one to the New England Patriots in Super Bowl 49, which is a very, very sore subject for us. So with regard to how we do business in Seattle, I just want to kind of talk through some of our coaches and their eras as we move forward. And we don't have as much history as Minnesota, so I'll be catching up to Billy soon, and then he'll be able to go right off of where I'm at. So John Thompson was the first person who recruited and hired our very first coach, Coach Jack Patera. And that was an individual who was, Billy, a Minnesota Vikings assistant coach. He was our very first head coach. If you did not know that, you probably did, though, knowing you. So after he became our head coach, we came in and had to get our squad through the expansion draft. And we did that at the same year the Tampa Bay Buccaneers entered the NFL, the football league as well. So we shared a draft. We drafted second, and our very first draft pickup was a gentleman named Steve Niehaus. He was a defensive tackle, and I just have to mention his name because he was the very first Seahawk to hit the scene and represent us. So as we pushed forward, we were initially in the American Football Conference, which was a team in the AFC West, and we were there from 1977 to 2001. So we were in there for 24 years, creating significant rivalries with some of the teams that we still have rivalries with to this day. San Diego Chargers, Kansas City Chiefs, at the time the Oakland Raiders, they're now the Las Vegas Raiders, and the San Francisco 49ers. So then we fast forward to 2002 to current day, and we are now in the NFC West, and we have some of our still rivalries with the San Francisco 49ers, which is a bitter rivalry to this day. So just really quickly, our team colors are college navy, action green, and wolf gray. Our mascot is Blitz, and we also have a Seahawk that is actually a Seahawk, Taima, that flies around on home games to represent what that hawk can do. So the Seahawks, we're the only NFL team to switch conferences twice in the post-merger era, and the Seahawks' first regular season victory came against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who was also an expansion team, and we know their history where it took them a lot longer to get a W, but we were able to get one against them, even though we did not have a great first year where we finished 2-12. So that kind of fast forwards us up to the early 80s, which is where I'll pause and let Billy pick up his team because of their history that is much deeper than ours. But I'll pick it back up from 1983 when Coach Chuck Knox took the reins.
All right, Cap, good stuff. So, I have something for you about the Seahawks, where they got their name from. So I don't know if you're going to get into that later, but I actually know the answer to that one.
Let's hear it.
So they had the fans weigh in on this and send in their suggestions, and I believe there was about 2,100 entries, and 150 of them chose the Seahawks. The Seahawks, I don't know if I got the year right, but it was a 1952 or in the 50s minor league hockey team, and that's where they got the name Seahawks from by fan vote. So I thought that was a very interesting fact. So getting back to the Skull Vikings, I left off when we won the last NFL championship, 27-7 before the merger, and unfortunately that year also was Super Bowl 4. So after the championship game, that's probably why they didn't pay a lot of attention to the Ed Thorpe Memorial Trophy, because they really wanted that Super Bowl trophy. 1970, they were heavily favored, and they lost to the Kansas City Chiefs 23-7, and that was the first of 4 Super Bowl losses in the 70s. 70s were bittersweet for Minnesota. 4 Super Bowls, but they did not come out victorious in any of them. 1974, Super Bowl 8, they lost to the Dolphins 24-7. 1975, Super Bowl 9, lost to the Steelers 16-6. And then in 1977, Super Bowl 11, they lost to the Oakland Raiders 32-14. What can I say? 3 Super Bowl appearances in 4 years. We had 11 players that played in all 4 Super Bowls. Mick Tingelhoff, Ron Yeri, Ed White, Alan Page, Paul Krause, Carl Eller, Jim Wrong Way Marshall, Wally Hilgenberg, Roy Winston, Fred Cox, actually he's the one who invented the Nerf football, and finally Bobby Bryant. It would have been 4 in a row if not for one of the many heartbreaking moments in Vikings history. Happened in 1975, a season they ended with a 12-2 record. They were led by Tarkington and running back Chuck Foreman and got off to a 10-0 start. They easily won another division title, but they lost to the Dallas Cowboys in the playoffs 17-14 on a controversial touchdown pass from Cowboys quarterback Roger Staubach to wide receiver Drew Pearson that now is known as the Hail Mary. I'll tell you, I've watched that play over and over and over. Pearson definitely pushed off cornerback Nate Ray, committing pass interference. It was not called. I was furious. But a little fun fact, after that, many years later, I actually met and took a picture with Drew Pearson at an end-user forum event held at Dallas Cowboys' new stadium in September of 2017. I did get a chance to ask him about the play, and he responded, if it wasn't called, it wasn't a penalty. Enough said on that. Let's move to the 80s, since we got through the 70s pretty quick. The 80s was not a great era. Vikings played their final game at Metropolitan Stadium on December 20th to conclude the 1981 season. 1982 brought on the new Metrodome Stadium, and just a fun fact here, Metropolitan Stadium, located in Bloomington, Minnesota, played there from 1961 to 1981. It's now the site of the Mall of America. And I'm sure some people knew that, but many younger Viking fans probably do not know that. Fun fact, too, the Vikings played their first game at the Metrodome in a preseason matchup against your Seattle Seahawks on August 21st in 1982. In a game, Minnesota won by a big score of 7-3. So, highlights of the 80s. Following the strike-shortened 87 season, the 87 Vikings, who finished 8-4 in the regular games but 0-3 using strike replacement players, pulled 2 upsets in the playoffs. They defeated the 12-3 New Orleans Saints 44-10 at the Superdome in the wild card game, and then the following week in the divisional playoff game, they beat the 13-2 San Francisco 49ers 36-24 at Candlestick Park. During that game, Anthony Carter set the all-time record for most receiving yards in a playoff game with 227 yards. The Vikings then played the Washington Redskins in the NFC Championship game on January 17th, 1988, again on the road at RFK Stadium. Trailing 17-10, the Vikings drove to the Redskins' 6-yard line with a little over a minute left in the game, but failed to get the ball into the end zone. Their hopes ended when Darren Nelson dropped a pass from Wade Wilson on 4th down at the goal line. Ouch. I'm telling you, the hits, I tell you one thing about being a Minnesota Viking fan, you definitely you build character. So, you're a true fan if you can handle all these gut-wrenching losses and still hang in there. Well, let's talk about the low light of the 80s. Number 1, Les Steckel is hired as the coach for the 1984 season. He was an assistant coach, young, very young, and they thought he had, had a bright mind. But first season, loses 13 games, and they show him the door. Bud Grant comes out of retirement to coach one more year in 1985 and finishes with a 7-9 record. Longtime assistant Jerry Burns is hired to replace Grant starting the 86 season. He served as the Viking offensive coordinator from 68 to 85. when the team won 11 division titles and played in 4 Super Bowls. Low light of the 80s, number 2. Man, this Dallas Cowboy fans love this one. On October 12, 1989, the Vikings acquired Herschel Walker from Dallas. The final result of this trade gave the Vikings Walker, 3rd round choice Mike Jones, 5th round choice Reggie Thornton, and a 10th round choice Pat Newman. And also 3rd round Jake Reed in 1991. Dallas, they got a boatload of picks. But they also got players, Isaiah Colt, David Howard, Darren Nelson, and Jesse Solomon. All starters for the Vikings. They also got a 1st, 2nd, and 6th choice in the 1990 draft. A 1st, 2nd choice in the 1991 draft. A 1st, 2nd, and 3rd round choice in the 1992 draft. Wow. That was a boatload of picks. And Herschel Walker never lived up to the hype. The Cowboys turned 2 of those picks into Emmitt Smith and Darren Woodson. And they rode those draft picks to 3 Super Bowls in the early to mid-90s. Cat, that's a little bit of the 70s, a little bit of 80s. I'm going to turn it back over to you for some more Seahawk.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate you bringing up the information with regard to how we got our name, because as a kid, my mom let me and my brothers send in an entry to name the Seahawks. I have no idea what I suggested at the time, but we were a part of that process, and I definitely did not win, and neither did my brothers, but I'm glad you brought that fun fact up. Yeah, about 20,000 entries came in, and 3 of them were from me and my 2 brothers at the time, so that was pretty cool. So talking about the Seahawks, I'm going to go into the Chuck Knox era, which went from 1983 to 1991. Seahawks fans know Chuck Knox and his version of football as Ground Chuck. Names like Kurt Warner come to mind when you're talking about him in his era. We struggled a lot in the 80s, but we hired Chuck Knox in 1983 as our head coach, and we finished with a 9-7 record. And made our first postseason appearance after that by defeating the Denver Broncos in a wild card round, and then the Miami Dolphins before losing to the AFC Championship to the eventual Super Bowl champion, the Los Angeles Raiders. The following season, we had our best season before 2005, where we finished 12-4, and Coach Knox won NFL Coach of the Year, which was awesome. Now, get to 1988, where we have Ken Behring and his partner, Ken Hoffman. They purchased the team for a reported $80 million, and we won our first division title in 1988. But from 1989 to 1998, slim pickings. We had horrible records. The best record we had during that time span came in 1990, where we finished 9-7, and that was the best that we could do. The lowest point came in 1992, where we finished with our worst record, a team history of 2-14. So those were brutal years. Brutal years. But when you talk about Seahawks football, you hear names like Steve Largent, Cortez Kennedy, Walter Jones, Kenny Easley. Those are our Hall of Famers. They are Emerald royalty. But we also have folks in our Ring of Honor inside that are recognized and acknowledged, such as Dave Brown, Jacob Green, Dave Craig, Kurt Warner, and Jim Zorn, all inducted to the Seahawks Ring of Honor, along with Pete Gross, who was our radio announcer. Love that guy. And Paul Allen, may he rest in peace, our owner. And Chuck Knox, a head coach that I mentioned earlier. So again, that's brief, but that takes us up to the 1990s era. And I will pause here and look forward to jumping into that, because there's definitely some NFC ties that you will be familiar with.
All right, Cap, great section right there. You know, Chuck Knox. Vikings went up against Chuck Knox an awful lot when he was with the Rams, and they beat the snot out of him. So you know, we, even though he wasn't with the Seahawks, we definitely got Chuck Knox back in the day. So I ended last with the finishing up the 80s and the awful Herschel Walker trade. So I'm gonna segue into the 90s here. Jerry Burns retired after 6 seasons as head coach, and Dennis Green in 1992 was named the 5th coach in team's history. Norm Van Brocklin started it off. Bud Grant, the greatest coach to ever coach the Vikings, had a long and successful run, all 4 Super Bowls. Les Steckel for 1 year, awful choice. And they should have picked Jerry Burns, who ended up being next. And after Bud Grant came back for 1 year. And now we are on with Dennis Green. Green won 4 NFC Central Division titles, 8 playoff appearances, 2 NFC Championship game appearances, and an all-time record of 97-62. Can't say I love Dennis Green. Can't say I disliked him. Some of his choices sometimes had me shaking my head, but overall, really good for the franchise. 1998, a year to remember for the franchise. Spectacular offense led by quarterback Randall Cunningham, who replaced an injured Brad Johnson. Running back Robert Smith. Veteran wide receiver Chris, all I do is catch touchdowns, Carters. And explosive rookie Randy Moss. The Vikings set a then NFL record by scoring a total of 556 points, never scoring fewer than 24 in a game. They finished the season 15-1. Their only loss was to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 27-24 in Week 9. In the playoffs, the Vikings rolled past the Arizona Cardinals, 41-21, and came into the Metrodome heavily favored for the NFC title showdown with the Atlanta Falcons, who also had a pretty decent year. They went 14-2 in the regular season. Kicker Gary Anderson, who had just completed the first perfect regular season in NFL history, not missing a single extra point or field goal attempt the entire year. He missed a 38-yard field goal attempt with just over 2 minutes remaining, which would have put the Vikings up by 2 scores. The Falcons' ensuing drive tied the game. This led to a controversial decision by head coach Dennis Green to run out the clock on second down with 30 seconds left and 2 timeouts at their own 27-yard line. This was a team that could strike like lightning from anywhere on the field, and he decided with 2 timeouts to let the game go into overtime. Unbelievable, inexcusable. The offense they had that year, he needed to go for it. Though the Vikings did win the coin toss, Atlanta went on to win in overtime on Morton Anderson's 38-yard field goal. The Vikings became the first, another first for the Vikings, 15-1 team to fail to reach the Super Bowl. The Falcons, though they did make it to the Super Bowl, lost to John Elway and the Denver Broncos. We would have matched up really good with the Broncos, and I feel that's where we should have got our first one. That team was dynamic. That really concludes the 90s, so we're going to move right into the 2000s. The Vikings entered the decade by winning the divisional championship and an appearance in the NFC Championship game where they were defeated 41-0 by the Giants in a game. Though they were on the road, they were favored to win. The loss hurt. It was embarrassing. And I even got a side story for this one. There was a local newspaper that was looking for a local Minnesota Viking fan here in Connecticut. And somebody told them about me, and they came to my house to do an interview for the paper and took pictures of my memorabilia and published a picture of me with my memorabilia on the front page of the sports. And then Minnesota rolls out and does nothing and gets destroyed 41-0. So, wow, awful. Anyway, let's moving on. During a disappointing 5-11 season in 2001, the Vikings fired Dennis Green, and Mike Tice coached the final game of the season. That season was a tragic season in when offensive lineman Corey Stringer died of heat stroke in training camp. Stringer was just coming into his own. He earned a Pro Bowl appearance in 2000. And Corey Stringer probably would have been All-Pro for years to come. 2001 was also the final season with Chris Carter in Minnesota. So after that, Mike Tice officially became the 6th coach of Vikings history, starting with the 2002 season. Not much happened in that season. 2003 saw the Vikings come close to getting to the playoffs, but the Arizona Cardinals completed a game-winning touchdown on 4th and 28 with no time left on the clock, knocking the Vikings out of the playoffs. Another painful loss. In 2004, the Vikings became the 2nd team in NFL history to have a 500 record in the regular season and win a playoff game, defeating the rival Green Bay Packers at Lambeau Field in their first ever playoff meeting, 31-17. They lost to the eventual NFC champions, Philadelphia Eagles, in the division round. After that, Mike Tice was let go after the 2005 season and replaced by Brad Childress, the 7th coach of Vikings history. I wasn't thrilled with Mike Tice's time as the head coach, as I always thought he was in over his head, but I despised the hiring of Childress. Was not a fan. He came from Philadelphia. 2007 saw the arrival of Adrian Peterson with the 7th overall pick. Do I need to say anything more? All day, Adrian Peterson, great Viking for many years. On August 18, 2009, after months of speculation and negotiations, twice retired veteran quarterback Brett Favre. Until 2007, he played 16 years for division arch rival Green Bay, signed a 2-year, $25 million deal with the Vikings. This turned out to be one of the best years in Vikings histories. They were ousted in overtime by the New Orleans Saints in the NFC Championship game, which was later referred to as Bounty Gate. And you know what? I'm going to toss it over to you here and take a break here, Cap, because I know at some point in your checkered career you were a Saints fan, and so I know you know a little bit about this game.
Just a little bit. So before we get to that, which we will at some point, I do want to pick it up from 1996, really, with regard to the Mike Holmgren era. And just for some history, we almost lost our team in the 1996 year because we had a couple of individuals, Ken Behring and Mr. Hoffman, who were trying to transfer our team's operations to Anaheim, California. Highly hot topic. Fans were not happy. A lot of even moving trucks had moved into the facilities to try to start loading things to take them down to California. Fortunately for us, the NFL commissioner jumped in and said, you're going to get fined $500,000 a day if you don't get this team back to where they belong, which was Seattle. So that happened. Behring and Hoffman ended up selling the team to Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen in 1997 for $200 million. And that was one of the best moves in franchise history at the time. In 1999, Mike Holmgren was hired as our guy, and he would coach later for 10 seasons. We had our second division title under his watch, and we also had a wild card berth, and we're in the playoffs, and he also took us to the Super Bowl, which I'll touch on briefly. So Mike Holmgren, returning to the NFC, you know him very well as the many battles between the Vikings and the Packers, but we were really happy to have him. We wanted someone that was firm and would be kind of a disciplinarian, if you will, to get things in order, and he was absolutely that. One of the cool things about Mike Holmgren from a fan's perspective is that if we were mad at our main guy at the time, which was Matt Hasselbeck, who we love, because nobody tries harder than Matt Hasselbeck. That guy, he can hurt you, and he's never going to quit, but he is a gambler to a degree. And sometimes that didn't jive well with Mr. Holmgren. So when we would see Holmgren and Hasselbeck's exchanges on the sidelines, we were like, yeah, Mike's got this. And it was great. They had a great relationship from everything that I know. And we appreciated everything that my man Hasselbeck did. Because one thing I always would ask, and so the other fans, is just give it everything you got. Don't come in here halfway and not try hard. And Matt Hasselbeck tried hard. And I'm going to give him some props later as we talk about a playoff loss that some people want to pin on Matt. But you can't do that. But we'll touch on that a little bit later. So 2002, we returned to the NFC West as part of the NFL's realignment plan, where you have 4 teams in each division. And that realignment plan for us, and I mentioned it earlier, included us being in there with Denver, San Diego, Kansas City, and Oakland. So 5 teams that year. And we had some bouncing around a little bit for construction purposes, where we played a season or 2 in Husky Stadium, Washington Huskies, in their stadium, when the Kingdome was imploded in 2000. And on the Kingdome, I was fortunate enough to be able to go to some games in there. And you talking about loud? Oh my goodness. And I'll talk about loud again as we talk about what's going on in Lumen Field, but it was so loud in that Kingdome that you could not hear anything. And that extended to the Mariners too, when the Mariners had their nice run until the Yankees took us out, which I don't want to talk about.
I happen to be a Yankee fan.
That does not surprise me. But in 2005, we had our best season in franchise history. We were 13-3, and that included a 42-0 rout of Philadelphia, the Eagles, on Monday night. Our 13-3 record earned us the number 1 seed in the NFC for the playoffs, and we won the NFC Championship game in 2005. And I was there. We played against the Carolina Panthers. It was a beautiful introductory defensive scheme for the Carolina Panthers, where I know Lofa Tatupu had an amazing collision in that first, second, and third down. I forget which down it was on, but he rocked whoever had that ball, and the stadium erupted. So that was beautiful. We loved it. We ended up getting into the Super Bowl, but we lost Super Bowl 40 to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yes, there was a lot of controversy with regard to some missed calls in our minds that the refs should have called, and later on Bill Levy did admit that they missed some calls, but to be honest, we had a lot of opportunities to secure that game earlier, and we didn't do it. So it should never get to a position where the ref can dictate the game. You gotta get after it so that doesn't game change, and that didn't happen. So fast forward though through that, we love Mike Holmgren. He's on the radio a lot in Seattle, giving excellent insight, and he's still as sharp and doesn't miss anything. So if you're not on your A game, he will observe it and pull it out and put it on the air. And he's very professional with it, but he's still a coach at heart. And I love when they interview him and he gives his insight because it's great. So that gets us up to the 2009 NFL season where we finished third in the NFC West with a 5-11 record under his watch. And then this was the outgoing of Coach Holmgren's watch, where shortly after his first full season with the Seahawks, head coach Jim Mora came in and he was fired on January 8th, 2010. And that takes us basically up to where we are today with our current coach, Pete Carroll. So I will save that segment for my last segment and let you, Billy Gold, take us to the next level in the Minnesota Vikings world.
Great. Let's keep this rolling right along. And I left off with the Bounty Gate game, and that concluded the 2009 season, and then we go to the 2010 season. And good news, Childress is fired and replaced with Leslie Frazier for the final 2 games. Here's a very fun fact: the Metrodome roof collapses on my birthday, December 11th.
I didn't know that.
All the stuff that happens in Minnesota.
It's tied to you somehow.
You can't make that up. Leslie Frazier then officially named head coach starting with the 2011 season. Not much there. Not much return on that first year. 2012 season, the Vikings losing the first round of the playoffs to the Green Bay Packers. At the end of the 2013 season, Leslie Frazier was fired. Didn't have an okay run. More of a defensive guy. Like that cover 2. But again, I always thought of him as a defensive coordinator, not a head coach. This was also the last season at the Metrodome. The Vikings would play the next 2 seasons outside at the University of Minnesota Stadium. 2014, Mike Zimmer, our current head coach, hired to be the new head coach. And then in 2015, led by their top 5 defense, they ended the season with an 11-5 record and the number 3 seed in the playoffs. However, Cap, as you well know, they lost to the Seattle Seahawks 10-9 after Blair Walsh, us and kickers, I don't know about us and kickers, missed a 27-yard field goal in the third coldest game in NFL history. I could have made that field goal. He missed a freaking chip shot. Unbelievable. Ouch.
That weather was brutal. I remember watching that game, and I did not know which way it was going to go, and I was ecstatic when we came out of there with that W. I did not know how that would end.
How did he miss that? 2016, U.S. Bank Stadium is finally ready. Beautiful facility. The captain and I will be visiting for the Seahawks-Vikings game on September 26th, right here this season, 2021. 2017, the Vikings won the NFC North for the second time in 3 years, finishing with a 13-3 record that saw them go into the playoffs as the number 2 seed in the NFC. In the divisional round, they came up against the New Orleans Saints. With less than 10 seconds remaining in the game and trailing by a single point in a back-and-forth game, the Vikings lined up on 3rd and 10 on their own 39-yard line. Quarterback Case Keenum, a career backup, having a career year, threw the ball to wide receiver Stephon Diggs, inside field goal range, near the right sideline, giving Diggs a chance to get out of bounds with just enough time for a game-winning field goal. However, safety Marcus Williams missed the tackle. He didn't even touch him, allowing Diggs to run down the sideline for the first walk-off game-winning touchdown in NFL playoff history. Minnesota Vikings radio announcer Paul Allen, boy, these Allens,
that's right,
they're on both teams.
That's right.
Called to play the Minneapolis Miracle. The Vikings went on the road to the NFC Championship for the opportunity to play in Super Bowl, what is that, 52? Yes, 52, which was held in their own brand new stadium, only to lose 38-7 to the eventual Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. In this game, the Vikings took the ball on the opening drive, straight down the field, and scored a touchdown. And I'm thinking, this is an unbelievable run, and it's still going. Nothing went well after that drive.
That's a tough day.
38 straight points to the Eagles. Another heartbreak. We get so close and we just implode. 2018, Kirk Cousins signs on as the highest paid football player of all time. Not many options here. But really, Kirk Cousins, Not for that money. He has he's a stats guy. If you have the right players around him, I think he can win. But I don't think he could do it himself. 2019, the team finished the season at 10-6, clinching a wild card spot. They went on to pull an upset victory in the wild card round against the New Orleans Saints, 26-20 in overtime. Adam Thielen's 43-yard catch in overtime set up the game-winning score from tight end Kyle Rudolph, giving the Vikings their first playoff win on the road since 2005. I will say this: since that Bounty Gate game, the Saints are jinxed. And we've handed them some good defeats since then.
Oh boy!
The Minneapolis Miracle, and then this one. I hope we beat them the 10 next time, 10 straight. The victory advanced the team to the divisional round where they lost to the eventual NFC champions, the San Francisco 49ers, 27-10. 2020, no playoffs. Here we are for the 2021 season. So, Captain, why don't you finalize your segment, and then we'll wrap up our first episode, and looking forward to good things to come.
Billy Gold, that sounds good to me. Pete Carroll came in 2010. It's 2021, and he's still there. Now, if you disregard his age, he's the youngest coach in the NFL. But if you put his age in there, he might literally be considered the oldest coach.
I don't think we touched on something.
What's that?
It was the defensive coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings at one point.
He was with the Patriots as well. So, and I didn't know about the Vikings piece. I'm not sure about that, but I know he was a coordinator with the Patriots. And he didn't last long. Went back to, I believe, the college ranks, stacked up some trophies, and came back to the NFL. And he's with us to this day. But really quickly, with regard to him, and there's something about this that doesn't get spoken about, but I'm going to bring it up. In 2010, his first season, we made history, Seattle. And in 12s and people that are Seahawk fans, we use third person or first person a lot. We use we a lot because we are a part of the team. We're the 12th man. We got our jersey retired in the stadium. So if I say we, I'm talking about the Seahawks, even though I'm not a Seahawk player, of course. But in 2010, the Seahawks made history by making it to the playoffs despite having a 7-9 record. There was a lot of controversy and a lot of talk about, how could they get in? They're 7-9, even though the Rams were 7-9, but we had the tiebreaker. The 49ers were 6-10, and the Cardinals were 5-11. So we were the best squad in the conference, or in the division. And if there's anything that would be indicative of what Pete Carroll would bring to the table, it would be how we performed in that game, because we were 7-9, don't care. We played the Saints, so you might like this, Billy Gold. We played the Saints, and we ended up beating them in our home. And the score was 41-36, but the game is also very memorable because of a run by Marshawn Lynch, which was known later as the Beastquake, where it actually kicked off the Richter scale and registered as an earthquake because it got so loud in that stadium. It was a 67-yard run. He broke 9 tackles to clinch the victory, and he dove into the end zone backwards. Great day for Seahawk fans and for people that want to see excellent football where people just don't quit. And that was absolutely what Pete Carroll and those folks, Marshawn Lynch, of course, they embodied the never quit mindset. So fast forward a little bit to the 2012 season, where it started out with a little shaky, where we had a rookie quarterback. You may have heard of him, named Russell Wilson. And he was, getting his feet wet, but you could tell there was talent. And I remember one of the telling sound bites of that season where Marshawn Lynch is on the sideline and NFL Films kind of pans in on him. He says something to the effect of, "Man, that boy's special." Something like that, recognizing the talent in Russell Wilson, which is absolutely he's absolutely a talented human being and a great football player as well. So I don't want to go through that entire season. I just want to push really quickly to the 2013 Super Bowl season, where we built off the momentum from 2012. We ended up getting ourselves into the Super Bowl game against the Denver Broncos. To me, with our 13-3 record that year, that was one of the most fun games I've ever seen. I know some folks don't like to see blowouts, especially in a Super Bowl, but I can't imagine any Seahawks fan saying that was a boring game or not fun because it was so lopsided. We started the game hot and finished it hot, and 6 players were named to the Pro Bowl that year. Russell Wilson, Max Unger, Marshawn Lynch, Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas, and Cam Chancellor, Bam Bam. And we'll talk about those, I know, in our next episode coming up. But I just wanted to take us to that Super Bowl victory. Yes, we had 2 Super Bowl losses. We got to the Super Bowl back-to-back right after that season against the Broncos, and we lost to the New England Patriots, which is still very, very painful to talk about. But we did get there, and a lot of controversy as to how that game ended, but I understand it, having played football, and I understand the reasoning by the coach. It wasn't, and it's easy to second guess it after it's over, but
Defensive guy made a great play.
he did, and that was based off film study, and he scouted it, and he recognized the formation. And if we were going to throw the ball, since we're there, we got to talk about it. I wouldn't throw it into the interior. If you're going to throw a hot route, throw it to where nobody can get it but the sidelines or your receiver. But you can't forget you got beast mode in the backfield, and you had a down to burn. So I get
it. They overthought it.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah. So that was that takes us kind of up to current day, because I know we're going to really recap everything once we start with our final 53-man rosters going forward. But Pete Carroll still has the helm. We have a talented roster, and I expect great things from the Emerald Nation and them Hawks this year. And it's going to be really fun, Billy, going through the Vikings ups and downs and our ups and downs in our inaugural season as we get this fantastic voyage kicked off.
Absolutely. Great kickoff show. We're going to grow. We're going to get better. That's going to close the book on this episode. What I can tell you is the next episode, we're going to concentrate on an article that I saw, and I couldn't get it to Captain fast enough, about the all-time rosters. And boy, I know I moved 3 players off the roster, so it's going to be an interesting subject. All you Scolders out there, stay tuned all season. I'll hold down my end, and I know, Cap, you're going to take care of the 12.
Absolutely. Looking forward to an exciting upcoming season. It will be a fun ride. And to the Emerald Nation, go Hawks.